Over the past few years, Kentucky has wowed the nation with aggressive efforts to modernize our healthcare delivery system, our P through 12 education system, and our economy, particularly our global presence. In the process, we have become a more vibrant, competitive, and a stronger state. But a fundamental weakness continues to hold us back: an archaic tax code that was designed for a 20th century economy. Kentucky deserves better, and it needs better to compete for 21st century jobs and create 21st century businesses, to help us develop and maintain a highly trained and healthy workforce, and to raise the quality of life of our families. We must create a modern tax structure that works for us, not against us. Today, as I promised, I'm unveiling a proposal to modernize Kentucky's tax structure. The Kentucky Competes Plan contains 22 specific changes based in large part on the work of the Blue Ribbon Commission on Tax Reform that I created 2 years ago. The commission, headed by Lieutenant Governor Jerry Abramson, who joins me today, pursued 5 fundamental goals for our tax system. Competitiveness. Kentucky must be equipped to continue attracting and retaining jobs and investment. Fairness. Tax obligations must be fair to different groups of taxpayers. Simplicity. The code must be easy to understand and follow. Elasticity. State revenues must mirror changes in our economy. And adequacy. Our tax system must do its job and provide sufficient revenue. With those same 5 principles as a backdrop, my plan improves Kentucky's ability to compete in the following ways. It lowers tax rates for individuals and businesses. It expands our tax base. It protects Kentucky's signature industries. It removes burdens that punished Kentucky-based businesses as compared to out-of-state competitors. It takes into account new technology in the changing marketplace. It adjusts to demographic trends. It brings Kentucky's taxes in line with surrounding states. It improves the health of our workforce. And it creates jobs by making Kentucky more attractive to businesses. Now, you all have received handouts that explain the proposals in the Kentucky Competes Plan and their fiscal impacts, but I want to mention a few highlights. The plan lowers the individual income tax rate structure. Every Kentuckian, and let me stress, every Kentuckian will benefit from this change when it's coupled with the current family size tax credit, a newly established state earned income tax credit, and a new hold harmless credit. My plan also lowers the top corporate tax rate from 6% to 5.9%. Bringing Kentucky lower than all but one neighboring state. Also for businesses, my plan phases in what's called single-factor apportionment. This, folks, is a big job producer. Businesses in Kentucky that operate in multiple states currently determine their corporate income based on a 3-factor formula of sales, property, and payroll, with sales double-weighted. My plan proposes that we join almost 20 other states in switching to a formula that is based solely on sales. As a result, multi-state companies with a significant physical presence in Kentucky that includes lots of payroll and lots of property will see a significant tax saving. This will encourage businesses like large manufacturers and companies headquartered in Kentucky to expand in Kentucky, and for other businesses to locate here. Furthermore, my plan creates various tax credits to encourage investment in small businesses and high-tech research. And it exempts certain inventory from the state property tax. My plan also makes several changes that help our signature industries, those relating to bourbon, equine, and food animals. It creates a healthier workforce by raising the tax on cigarettes and other tobacco, including taxing e-cigarettes for the first time. It also broadens the sales tax to include selected services. Kentucky's sales tax structure is far behind in acknowledging a fundamental and ongoing transition from a goods-based economy to a service-based economy. In 1960, and look at this chart. This chart tells the whole story when it comes to our economy. In 1960, consumer spending on goods represented 53.4% of personal expenditures. By 2012, that number had fallen to only 33.8%. Conversely, in 1960, consumer spending on services represented 46.6% of personal expenditures. By 2012, that number had increased to 66.2%. Look at this trend. This trend from goods to services has seriously eroded Kentucky's tax base when it comes to the sales tax. Therefore, we must modernize our sales tax structure. Kentucky already taxes some services, but not nearly what most other states do. My plan also brings Kentucky closer to most neighboring states in how we tax retirement income for those with high earnings, while still giving those taxpayers more favorable treatment than those other states. This nation's and this state's demographics are changing. But while our population is aging, retired people still enjoy all of the same protections, all of the same services that government provides. This change does not affect adjusted gross incomes of less than $80,000 a year. So elderly people with fixed incomes are not affected by this proposal. In fact, this proposal will affect only about 90,000 of the 1.8 million tax filers in Kentucky. Also, we will continue to exempt Social Security benefits from taxation. My plan eliminates taxes on certain classes of tangible personal property that cost more to collect than they bring in. And finally, my plan would simplify tax forms by requiring married couples to use the same filing status on their state tax form as they use on their federal form. And while I'm at it, let me reiterate that I support putting a constitutional amendment on the ballot that would allow our local communities to vote on a local sales tax for specific projects that they may need. That issue will be addressed in separate legislation, but it is no less critical to our community's success. Now, most of these proposals that you see are not new. Far from it. Like I said, they're based in large part on recommendations made by the Commission on Tax Reform. Many of these recommendations were also featured in 12 previous studies of Kentucky's tax structure completed since 1982. So we've been talking about many of these specific fixes to our outdated tax structure for over 3 decades. The Commission's report has been in the public domain since December of 2012, and every leader in Kentucky ought to be intimately familiar with it by now. The Commission held town hall meetings in every congressional district of this state, and Lieutenant Governor Abramson himself has delivered over 50 speeches discussing its recommendations. I've addressed these issues on many occasions as well. In fact, most of these ideas were discussed in detail with legislative leaders during the negotiations over the unfunded public pension liability in the 2013 session. So nobody who's been paying attention should be surprised by these proposals. And yes, although raising additional revenue was not the primary motivation of this process, my plan will achieve that secondary goal once it is fully implemented. The silver lining in making a tax structure more modern and more competitive is that it results in more revenue as our economy grows. That's common sense and a defining characteristic of a sound tax code. The initial Additional revenue created is modest, approximately $210 million, which is just over 2% of current official revenue estimates. It also roughly matches the amount of our current structural imbalance, meaning that with these changes, state government will again be living within its means. That's a good thing. And in the long term, because we will finally have a 21st century tax code tied to a 21st century economy, additional revenue will be generated as the economy grows. Finally, a word about process. Representative Rick Rand, who is here with us today, who is chairman of the House Appropriations and Revenue Committee, has agreed to introduce this legislation in order to begin the discussion. And I understand that the committee will hold hearings to receive input from the public. However, I am well aware that a proposal to amend our tax code is a politically sensitive matter, especially during an election year. I'm also aware that what needs to be a very serious discussion regarding tax reform could easily be turned into a political football to be used by political parties in the upcoming elections. I am determined to avoid that possibility. Therefore, I will not ask either chamber to vote on any bill containing these provisions or any version thereof, unless a consensus has been reached by a majority of both chambers, which will assure the bill's passage. This process is not new. This process proved successful in our efforts in the 2013 session to resolve our unfunded public pension liability. And in my opinion, it is the only approach which offers any opportunity for success with tax reform. The bottom line, it's time to make these needed improvements to our tax structure. The quality of our future depends on it, as does the future of our children and our children's children. Thank you. We'll take questions.
Governor, you said $210 million a year, and did you look at sales tax on services? Can you explain, did you?
The overall result of the proposal would be an increase of $210 million in revenue each year of the biennium.
Can you go over, did I miss something? Are there sales tax on new sales tax?
Yeah, you missed something. But I'll go back on that. I'll go back on that. If you'll look in your handout, this part of the handout here that's entitled Sales Tax on Limited Services. See that one? Got that one? This first reiterates exactly what this chart shows at the top, is that our economy has changed significantly since 1960. And we are now a much more service-based economy than we are a goods-based economy. And therefore, from a sales tax standpoint, our tax base is eroding every day. And so we're proposing to expand the sales tax, not raise the rate, but expand the sales tax to a limited number of services in our economy. There are three basic groupings. There is a grouping that includes the installation, maintenance, and repair of taxable personal property. We have, and you'll see the list here, but we have a number of situations in Kentucky to where you go and take something in for repair. When the parts are put on, whatever the personal property may be, we pay sales tax on those parts, the cost of those parts. We don't pay sales tax on the labor connected with putting those parts in. And what this proposal would do is to expand the sales tax to include that whole bill. You know, when you get a bill for repair of your car, you will not only be paying sales tax on the parts that were used, which you pay on now, you will also be paying sales tax on the labor connected with making that repair. So that's the first basic concept that's on the first page there. That produces, as you see in these different categories, about $143.14 million. And you also see on the right the other states that already do this. You know, with the first one, you see 24 other states already tax this. And then you see on the far right the number of contiguous states around Kentucky who do the same thing. So that'll give you kind of a breakout of each one of these areas. On the second page, we are talking about including some more admissions and recreational activities. Right now, We already collect sales tax on things like amusement park entry fees, art exhibits, concerts, cover charges at bars, fairgrounds, movie theaters, museums, et cetera, et cetera. We're proposing to include these additional items to which the sales tax would apply. That produces about $35 million. And then the third category are some limited commercial, residential, and personal services. You'll see the list on the last page. One is pretty easy to understand. The third bullet down, warranty service contracts for taxable property. Right now, you go into Kmart and buy an 80-inch television. You pay sales tax. But if you buy an extended warranty contract so that you can get your work done, over 5 years instead of over 1 year, you don't pay sales tax on that. So this would apply the sales tax to those extended warranty contracts. And then you have other categories as well. That produces another $102 million.
Did you look at higher paid services like legal fees?
We looked at all different kinds of services, and what we concentrated on were services that were not mobile. In other words, if we tried to tax legal services or CPA services, those kind of professional services, those are easily moved across our borders. They can be very mobile. You're not going to haul your car from Lexington to Cincinnati to fix a muffler. So we concentrated on the limited number of services that not only we think are static for Kentucky and would be done here, but also, for the most part, involve vendors who already have a sales tax number, because they already have to report sales tax on the parts they sell. And so this will not be an additional burden to vendors because they're already doing this. They will just include the labor part of the cost along with the parts part of the cost on their report.
Just to be clear on this, Governor, some of the examples of services, these are examples which would be sales tax, the fitness and recreation centers, golf courses, country clubs.
These are things right now that are not taxed with the sales tax that would be included. Yes. In each one of these three boxes are the additional services we're proposing to have the sales tax apply to. And if you, just to give you a quick summary, if you take this one sheet handout, you can get the totals on these things quickly. If you look down, for instance, on the next to last column down here, modernize code to acknowledge change in the economy and technology. The first one, broaden the sales tax to include selected services. On full implementation, it would produce roughly $280 million a year.
That's the big money maker in your plan, is it not, the extending of sales tax to services?
It's one of them, yes.
The biggest, is it?
Yes.
It looks like the other one is pension income, $176 million from there. Can you
Yes.
explain what you did with the $41,000? Does that exemption still take
Yes,
place?
and if you'll pull this handout out for a second, let me talk about the investment income proposal. If you will go over, let's see. Okay, it's on page 6 of that handout. We're proposing to, right now, every Kentuckian gets a $41,000, somebody give me the $41,110 exemption or exclusion for retirement income. Now, Kentucky does not tax Social Security benefits. This proposal would not tax Social Security benefits, so that's not even a part of this. Kentucky right now has a much more generous pension income tax exclusion than any state around us but Illinois. Illinois does not tax pensions, but if you will look at the listing of our other surrounding states here on page 6, Indiana taxes all private and public pensions with no exemption. Missouri taxes Social Security according to a schedule. as well as public pensions. Ohio, all retirement income is taxed, subject to a $200 tax credit. Virginia, they get a $12,000 exemption amount, way below our $41,110. West Virginia, no exemption for private pensions, full exemption for state and local public safety employees. So every state other than Illinois has a much less generous situation when it comes to retirement income. Now, with this proposal, what we're saying is that once your adjusted gross income hits $80,000, then between $80,000 and $100,000, if your adjusted gross income falls somewhere in there, you will see a decline in the amount of the exemption, the $41,000 exemption you can take. And just doing simple math, you know, you're talking a $20,000 stretch there and a $40,000 exemption. You're basically talking losing $2 of the exemption for every dollar above 80 that you get. So if I fill out my return and I'm making $90,000 on adjusted gross income and I've got some retirement income in there, you know, there's going to be somewhere probably right in the middle, I guess is the way the thing. I'd probably get to use about $20,000 of that $40,000 exemption on any retirement income I had. Once you get over $100,000, then you would not get to use that exemption. Your retirement income would be just a part of the rest of your income, and it would be figured based upon your deductions and all of the other things that you do in a return. Let me stress this. Only 90,000 filers out of 1.8 million filers will be affected by this proposal.
And you're not affected at all if your adjusted gross income is under $80,000.
Right.
You're not affected
You,
at all.
you still get to use your full credit. The credit is phased out between 80 and 100. Did I say that right?
You did. You did.
I'm sure it's here, Governor, but what are you doing on individual income tax?
Okay.
Rates?
Again, the front page of this handout that we've got. 4 out of our 6 neighboring states have lower top rates than we do. And the whole approach that our tax commission took to modernize our tax system was lower rates and broaden the base. That's in general the concept that the commission followed, and that's the concept that we followed in putting this proposal together. When you look on here, we have done a couple of things. We've lowered the top rate to 5.9 from 6. We've lowered other rates, and we have compressed the rate system to some degree. In other words, we'll now have 4 rates instead of where we used to have 6 rates. However, all of the lower income taxpayers will also see a benefit here, particularly when you couple the current family size credit, the proposed 7.5% state EITC, and for, we figured this down to the last number, and I said, give me any scenario that you can see where a low-income taxpayer will be adversely affected here. And they got down to where they said, well, we're not sure, but there may be a few, and so we put a hold harmless credit in here. For those few, we estimate it'll cost us $100,000 to make sure that no Kentucky taxpayer will suffer a detriment from the adjustment in these rates, and that every taxpayer will benefit from the reduction of these rates.
Governor, why does column 1, FY 15, 326, 16, 291, and full implementation?
Okay, we're back on this sheet, the one single sheet. It's because of the staged phase-in of some of these different proposals. The single factor apportionment, you can see that it cost $154 million, but we're phasing it in over a 3-year period. Some of the other items are phased in over a 3-year period. So the first year, the changes actually would produce $326 million. The The second year, 291, and the third year on full implementation, we would be at the 210 that I mentioned. Yes.
The other reason is all income and property tax changes have to begin on January 1. And so fiscal 15 would only have 6 months of, of that year.
Right.
Governor, one of the things that Republicans have often talked about with the tax structure is significant reductions in the income tax rate. These aren't really significant, to call them a fig leaf maybe. What would you say if Republicans said, let's take this rate down a lot farther, let's make it 5%, 4.5% or whatever?
Well, first of all, I think if you go ask someone who's been paying 6% and they now only have to pay 5.9, I think they would appreciate it. So I don't think they'll think it's a fig leaf. Maybe you don't fall in that category, Al, so we won't know. Secondly, we have attempted to implement or to put together a plan based upon those 5 principles that the Tax Commission and that our experts and consultants to the Tax Commission said were needed to produce a modern 21st century tax code. And their overall vision and their overall direction was lower your rates and broaden your base. We are lowering some rates. We're lowering income tax rates. We're lowering corporate tax rates. We're broadening the base in terms of the sales tax to apply them to some services so that as our economy grows, the tax system will produce us more revenue. I think it's a very balanced approach, and we've got to maintain a balance if we're going to have a modern tax system that works for everybody.
Governor, what kind of reception did you get from the leadership yesterday, and are you expecting any revisions or tweaks throughout the process based on that reception?
Well, one of the things that I told the leadership in both houses was, look, this is my proposal, and we've worked hard on it, but there are a lot of ideas out here. There are some ideas in the Tax Reform Commission's report that aren't in here, and I'm open to discussing any and all of that. We've got to find common ground if we're going to have any success here, and this will be a difficult process, no question about it. I can guarantee nobody that we're going to have success here. But I can guarantee you this, if we don't have a proposal out here and start talking about it, we won't have any success. So this is a beginning point. I think this proposal makes sense. I think it's fair. I think it's equitable to everybody. And I think it does what ultimately we want, and that is to have a modern tax code for Kentucky that will create revenues as the economy grows and that will attract new jobs in here and increase our competitiveness. We got a very good reception from the leadership in both houses. Obviously, I didn't ask them to make any commitments on any particular part of this or all of this, but I'm confident that everybody is going to take this seriously and is going to sit down and have some very serious, deliberate discussions to try to find some common ground.
Governor, thoughts on the cigarette tax and why you wanted to get out in front of taxing e-cigarettes?
Well, first of all, I have long advocated to raise taxes on cigarettes, and we did back in the early part of my administration, and were successful in raising it, I believe, from 30 to 60 cents a pack. When you look at our surrounding states, we're lower than many of them, and we're higher than a few of them. But this is as much a health issue as it is a revenue issue. There is no question that one of the major factors in Kentucky's poor health status is the fact that we rank very high in smokers. We rank very high in teenage smoking. We rank very high in pregnant women smoking. And all of that put together really plays a major role in creating the poor health situation that we've got in Kentucky. And if we can do anything to discourage smoking, and if raising the cigarette tax will discourage smoking, then I'm all for it. And I say that as somebody who in college smoked, just like a lot of us did, because it was the cool thing to do back then. Thank goodness I came to my senses and said, I'm just not sure this is a smart thing to do. And so I quit, and I've been off of them ever since. But it is a health issue as much as anything. The e-cigarettes, you're finding more and more folks buying e-cigarettes. You do notice that the same companies who sell cigarettes are the ones that are selling e-cigarettes, so they know that it can be a moneymaker. There's no question that e-cigarettes are addictive in that they deliver nicotine to the user, and nicotine is addictive. And the medical community tells me that nicotine in and of itself affects your health and can create bad health conditions in people. So, number one, I want to see a bill passed this session that puts an age limit on e-cigarettes, just as we now have on cigarettes. In other words, nobody under 18 years of age can buy them. And I want to put the same limitations on them in terms of access and where they can be shown in stores as now applies to cigarettes. And third, I think it's time to tax them just like we tax cigarettes and other tobacco products. Anybody else?
Governor, the earned income tax credit, I think you said it at
7.5% of the federal credit.
The Blue Ribbon Commission, they've done 15%.
Right.
Why did you decide to do less?
It was a balancing situation of trying to include all of the things that we needed to include to make us more competitive, and at the same time have the fairness component involved. And it worked that we felt like 7.5% was adequate to do that.
Governor, are you going to stick by this plan if the General Assembly decides not to pass any tax bill in this session and keep pushing it through the rest of your administration?
Yes. I can guarantee you that if we don't quite get to the finish line during this session, this won't be the last you hear of this proposal. We have to modernize our tax code. And I feel confident that if we keep sitting down and talking about this in a serious manner, we can get there. If not by the end of this session, then certainly by the end of my second term in office. It is that important to the future of this state that we modernize this code. You know, people have asked if we've got enough time to do this. We've got more than enough time to do this. We tackled one of the toughest issues that I think has been tackled in modern times in the legislature when we addressed the unfunded pension liability by changing the benefits and also raising $100 million of new recurring revenue every year to pay for it. And we basically got that done in 3 weeks because leaders in both House and Senate from both parties were willing to sit down with me and hammer out that consensus over the course of that 3 weeks. So this is a doable thing. And I know that we face an additional issue in that it's an election year. But I think we can hammer this out and everybody walk out here and support a modern tax code, and I don't think anybody gets hurt by that.
Governor, why did you decide not to make this revenue neutral, and what would you say arguments that it should be?
Well, depending upon how you look at it, you could argue that it's revenue neutral. Our structural imbalance right now is about $180 million. What that means is that we presently, in order to continue delivering the services that we do, we're using about $180 million of one-time money, not recurring revenues, but various one-time monies to cover that cost. And what this would do is basically put us on a pay-as-you-go basis. I mean, we would actually, for the first time in a long, long time, have a state government that is not spending more than it is taking in, not spending more on recurring expenses than it's taking in on recurring revenues.
Governor, if you say that you're not going to ask each chamber to take up your plan unless there's a consensus, and I'm wondering why then you met with House and Senate leadership separately yesterday, and why not get them in the same room?
Well, just a matter of convenience. They're all in session. They have different times when they're meeting and different committee schedules. And so I met with part of them at one point, another part of them at the other point. The main purpose was to make sure that everybody got briefed, at least from a 30,000-foot level, on this proposal before I made it public. Everybody will be in the same room over the course of the next few weeks as we try to hammer out some kind of consensus on this.
When we asked Representative Rand how he's going to handle this now, and will you be working more closely with Senator Leeper on this because the governor wants a consensus?
Well, first, I want to congratulate the governor and the lieutenant governor on their plan. They've worked long and hard on it, and you know, I want to congratulate them on that. And yes, you know, Senator Leeper and I work closely together. We've known each other many, many years, and we will. You know, my goal is, to have a plan out there, something we can talk about in bill form that people can look at, and we can start debating those issues. And as we do move forward, I would imagine that as the governor has expressed that, that it'll, boil down to the House and Senate leadership and Senator Leeper and myself hammering out these details, going back to our various caucuses. Because once you all get a chance to look at the budget, I've had a chance to look at it for a couple of weeks now, and there are many needs, and not just for this cycle, but cycles going forward. I think, you always seem that you can cobble it together for now, but, what position does that put you in going forward? So for us not to look at this and not address it, I think would not be, upholding our responsibilities as citizens we represent.
Representative Ray, do you support this plan? Could you vote for this plan, or are you looking?
I don't think the governor's asking us to support a starting point. I think the governor's not asking us to support this specific plan. He's saying, I have a plan. I'm throwing the ball up. Let's all get in the game. Let's all get off the bench and get in the game and work on this, both parties and both chambers. And that's what I support. I'm not going to say I support this part or that part, because I think my role will be to facilitate those type of discussions and to try to bring people together and talk about them and talk about the needs of the state and how we progress in education and public safety and health and human services, the type of services that state government is that our citizens demand we deliver.
Rick, do you want to mention that you got to hold it?
Yeah, I will be filing a bill. Now, the bill probably today or tomorrow, I think they'll have, but the bill itself will be the vehicle. The plan won't be in there, but at our Appropriations and Revenue Committee next Tuesday, at our regularly scheduled time, whoever the governor assigns to come over and testify on the bill, we'll hold hearings. We'll let them come and go through the bill in its entirety, and then take whatever public testimony may be necessary. But we will have a vehicle out there that we can use, that once a compromise is reached, that we'll be able to attach that to and move it through both chambers.
Chairman, are you concerned that the Republicans might not be too receptive to this because they're looking at the prospects of taking over the House in this fall's elections, and come back to the next session and pass whatever tax plan they wanted, regardless of what the governor wanted?
I think House Democrats and Republicans are both very cautious right now. Al, the governor mentioned several times it's an election year, and it's a sensitive time for all of us. But at the same time, I've heard a lot of rhetoric. At the chamber function in Lexington, I think I heard Senator Stivers and Representative Hoover both say tax reform is needed. Talking about it doesn't get it done. At some point, we all have to sit down, and that's the only way it's going to get done. If we all sit down and roll up our sleeves and say, what are the needs, and what can we do to fulfill those needs?
Lieutenant Governor, you chaired the commission. Is this plan as ambitious as you would have hoped?
Well, keep in mind a couple of things. One, when the governor put the commission together, which included Chairman Rand and Chairman Leeper, as non-voting members to sort of listen and understand what the issues were, the governor said to us very clearly, call it like you see it. There is no political filter that you put the information through at the commission level. Make the calls as you feel is best for the future of Kentucky. Somebody mentioned the EITC at 15%. I can remember the discussion. At one time, it was 5%. And somebody at the committee said, well, if we go up to 15%, the odds are they'll roll it back a little bit. So let's go to 15% and let the political filter. So that's really the basis that all of this is built upon. That's the predicate. Having said that, I count about 98% of all of the items that the governor is recommending, if not a little bit more, comes from the commission's report. So as I called the members of the commission yesterday and briefed each of them on what was basically in the document, there was a very positive feeling from most, from the overwhelming majority of them, that the governor had listened and what he was presenting reflected what we had recommended, with now a political filter in terms of getting things done with both Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate. So I feel very positive. I think the year we spent was certainly worthwhile, and now we'll take it to the next step.
Any others?
Okay, thank you.
Very good.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Governor.